emotional when she said, sorry, I'm Anne-Marie and I'm a believer in recovery. When she said you're with family, it's just it calmed me right down because I know that I am. I was feeling so cold. If you saw me, I've got a scarf, I've got the central heating on, I've got a scarf on, I've got a blanket, and I've got my hot water bottle sandwiched in between the blanket. And as it started coming nearer for me to share, I was like, I'm feeling all hot all of a sudden. So I started stripping, but I think I'll just, leave it at taking the scarf off. Um, yeah, thank you for asking me to share, Am. And when he asked me, I was like, "Can I do it on step two, please?" Because I feel like my testimony so entwined with step two, so I guess that's what I'm going to be sharing about my faith journey intertwined with step two. So I've always known about God. I went to Roman Catholic primary, junior, and secondary school. Um, God seemed very distant, harsh, even punishing. He just seemed really scary. And the truth is, I was told about him. I didn't really know him for myself, and I certainly didn't have a personal relationship with him. Anything that went wrong or was hard in life, I assumed it was because it was a punishment of some sort, or that I wasn't good enough to have something good. But when I got clean, NA, I go to NA, it told me that I could choose the God of my understanding just as long as it was loving and caring. And I cannot tell you how freeing this was to be able to put down that punishing belief and to allow myself to do something more friendly. And at first, I just focused on the power that was in the rooms, a power greater than myself, one addict helping another. Sometimes it was, that sponsorship, that sometimes it was the literature, it just changed on different days, whatever it was. And I remember the first time I went through step two. Well, the basic text, it tells us in step two that if you pass over it with a minimum of concern, you'll find the rest of the steps do not work. And I don't know if anybody is like me, but if you say don't touch that and it's hot, I'm gonna touch it just to see if what you're saying is right. So but that line also reminds me of a Bible passage, which is James 1:22 to 24. And it says, do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says. Anyone who listens to the word but does not do what it says is like someone who looks at his face in a mirror and after looking at himself goes away and immediately forgets what he looks like. Well, which one of us forgets what we look like in the mirror? In other words, it's like nuts being given an instruction that's good for you and not carrying it out. But unfortunately, I am a member of the Slow Learners Club, so I do that quite often. So I got to 6 years clean when that minimum of concern began catching up with me. And I believe it was around 8 years clean when I began to take step two seriously. And it was like almost like the cleaner I got and the longer I was around, my need for a power greater than the power that I had initially been introduced to when I first got clean, that need was greater and I just hadn't caught up with that need yet. I just the truth was I needed Jesus. I just didn't know it yet. So I was living alone in my, well, it's Barking at the time, and I was pretty angry. I'd gone through the steps a few times by then, a couple of times. I had multiple years clean. I was pretty angry. I was frustrated. I was bored. I was lonely, and I had cornered myself into this little box of familiarity. So I was completely unhappy, but because I knew what that unhappiness was, I just stayed stuck in it. And what does familiarity do? Breed contempt. I was very contemptuous. So my life was work, home meetings, repeat. Work, home meetings, repeat. And at work, I was acting out the dynamics in my family and my family role, which was the scapegoat. So I played that role really, really well. And I was always stirring up trouble for myself at work all the time. And I was also struggling because I was struggling with some of the things that I still walked in the rooms with. The only difference was that, I'd worked the steps a couple of times, had multiple years clean, and I just was not happy. I was surviving. I was not thriving, which is not the point of life or recovery. On the inside, anyways, on the outside, everything looked great. I'd bought a flat, had a car, had a good job. I had multiple years, had, all these things on the outside, but inside I was dying. So like one night in my flat, I'll never forget this night in my flat. I was proper miserable, and my washing machine had the audacity. It had the barefaced cheek to break down on me. And like a 2-year-old in a supermarket, like the kids, they can't get the sweets. Their mum says no. I kid you not, I threw myself down on my bedroom floor and I was cursing at God. I was like, why are you doing this to me? You never helped me. You're meant to be good. You're meant to be loving. You're meant to be caring, but you're horrible. What? I was proper throwing a tantrum. I was smashing glasses. And then I had this eureka moment, guys. I had this eureka moment, guys. I don't tell many people this. You won't believe me, but I really don't tell many people this. But on paper, I am smart. I'm technically smart. My husband would disagree with you. We have weekly competitions about who's dumb and dumber, and I hate playing with him because he always wins. But I'm telling you now, on paper, I am smart. I've got a degree. I've got the equivalent of a degree. I've got 2 sets of letters after my name. And when this washing machine broke, right, the best idea I could come up with in that eureka moment wasn't to go to the bank account and draw out some money and go Argos like normal people. It was to pawn a necklace that I had since I was 16 years old because I'm smart, right? I've got letters. That was the best idea that I could come up with. So I've got this necklace. It was gold. It had a unicorn horn on it. And I've gone to, marching down Barking Town Centre. I went to 3 pawn shops, right, to get the highest value for this necklace. And I got £180 for it. And I got home and I was slapping the money against my hand. I was so proud of myself that I'd solved the washing machine problem, right? I've got 100, I've done it. I'm a done. I'm going to get a new washing machine. And then God said to me, why didn't you come to me if you had a problem? And I was like, I don't know. And God said, you do know. And I said, I don't know. And God said, you do know. Why didn't you come to me if you had a problem? And just so I know that I'm not mad, like other people have heard God talking to them, right? Like it's not just me, like proper directly to you, you know. And then I just shouted like, because I don't trust you. I do not trust you. And it was like the truth was out loud that I didn't trust God. I knew he had existed. I'd always known he existed, but believing that he was loving and caring towards little old me, that he could help me, that he could restore me to sanity, I didn't really believe it all that time. I was 6, 7, 8 years clean by then, and I just didn't believe it. I knew that he could restore me to sanity in terms of, removing my desire a day at a time. And the first one does the damage because I was doing that. But everything else in my life, my future, at the time, my desire for a boyfriend, let alone a husband, my family, who I was continuously butting heads with, I didn't believe. I just didn't believe he could help me in those areas, and it was like in that moment of admitting that I didn't trust. It felt like a weight had just been lifted from my shoulders. Like I used to call God the most appalling names and basing my experiences of him on my dad and my real dad. My real dad's schizophrenic and my stepdad was physically abusive. Like my dad used to rob the local graveyard of the trinkets. I looked after him from 11 to the age of 27. And my stepdad, one minute we're having dinner, the next minute he's got his hands around my mum's throat. And I remember learning to read, and if I'd got a word wrong, he'd threaten and he'd hit me with his belt like I'm learning to read. You're meant to make mistakes. So I didn't trust them, and I certainly wasn't going to trust something that I couldn't see, but I know now that I was taking out those angry experiences on God. And I remember one day driving around this roundabout and I realised that all the curse words that I used to hurl at God, like he could have just gone ping, he could have just snuffed me, could have taken me out, like with one breath, he just could have. And I realised that he hadn't. And like I realised that that was love, him not doing that. I realised that in that moment. Luke 15:4-7 tells me that suppose one of you has 100 sheep and loses one of them, doesn't he leave the 99 in the open country and go after the lost sheep until he finds it? And when he finds it, he joyfully puts it on his shoulders and goes home. Then he calls his friends and neighbours together and says, rejoice with me, I've found my lost sheep. I tell you that in the same way there will be more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who do not need to repent. And it almost felt like God was saying to me, are you done? You know, like that eureka moment in my bedroom. He was like, are you done yet? I'm asking for a friend. His name's Jesus. That's what it felt like God was saying to me, you know. And the events that happened next felt like God was leaving the 99 and just chasing after me. Like he went out of his way to show me that he did love me and that I could trust him. And what I felt as well was God's compassion and his graciousness. Psalm 145 8-9 tells us the Lord is gracious and compassionate, he's slow to anger, he's rich in love, the Lord is good to all, he has compassion on all that he has made, and he has made me. You know, Psalm 103 tells us as far as the east is from the west, so far has he removed our transgressions from us. How far is the east from the west? Like when I think of how far the east is from the west, like you could go around the world and then some trying to measure how far the east is from the west. And it's mind blowing how far God will remove our transgressions from us, you know? Because I always felt like if I do something bad, I'm unforgivable. Well, those passages tell me differently. You know, they tell me differently. And this was really, 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 really important for me, having come from such a punishing belief in God. You know, and the NA basic text tells me as we see coincidences and miracles happening in our lives, acceptance becomes trust, accepting that God loves me, you know. And then here's a series of coincidences that began, or God incidences, I like to call them, that started happening in my life at that time. I'd rented out my flat after an operation. This was back in 2012 now. And then I had another great idea. I'm going to move back in with my mum. Never do that, people. Never, sorry, mums on it, but never move back in with your mum. So that was another great idea I had. And it was hell on earth. And I needed to move out for my sanity. And there was one night I spent the whole night stressing about how I was going to get back in my flat because I signed it up with not a recruitment agency, an estate agency, and they were like, if she don't want to move out, she don't have to. I was like, you never told me that when I gave you my flat. And then yeah, so that night I was up and I was just kept going, what if she don't mean God's got it? What if she don't mean God's got it? What if God's got it? God's got it. So the whole night, and the next day was a Sunday, and I thought, well, I'm just going to go to church. And I went to church. I went on my own. I didn't tell anyone I was going to church. And I didn't tell anybody in the church that I'd been up all night and I was worrying. And this particular church at this time started the service with a prayer request. And the first one they read out was that somebody was praying for a solution to an accommodation problem. And you know, when the back of the neck, the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. And I knew it wasn't my prayer. But it just felt like it was this moment between God and me. It was like God was answering. He was letting me know, you know, I heard you last night. I heard you. And the tenant, she ended up moving out a month earlier than I'd asked her. I felt nudged to go to a meeting that I never went to. It was a different fellowship and everything, but it was round the corner from where I lived. And I thought, just go. And who do I see there after 7, 8 years? The woman who 12-stepped me in the fellowship in the first place. And could you imagine how that filled me up? Could you imagine how she felt? Sorry, BBC breaking. Could you imagine how she felt, you know, seeing me after all those years? And another time I put my hand up to show a woman from Arizona around London for 3 days, and she was a Christian. She was actually the first Christian in recovery that I met, and I was studying at the time, and she'd hold Skype meetings with me all the way from Arizona. She gave me this daily devotional book called Jesus Calling. I'm always buying people this book because sometimes it's like the Just for Today. I don't know what other fellowships people are in, but in NA we've got the Just for Today. You know, sometimes it's like a hotline to to, it's just like a hotline, and it tells you something right where you're at. And Jesus calling's like, it's like a hotline to God sometimes. I got the funding for a course that I've been spent the best part of a year praying for, and I started the got the funding like lastminute.com, and then I started the course on my birthday. So I was able to leave a job that was also killing me from the inside. And then a woman came into my life who I began a Bible study with. And that's where I realized, hold on a minute, that's step three. That's step seven. That's step four. Like once you see the 12 steps in the Bible, you can't unsee it. Despite knowing that the person who 12 steps Bill W, in AA came from the Oxford groups, which was a Christian group. And so that we know the 12 steps are based off of Christian principles. But once you see them in the Bible, you just can't unsee it. So I came from somebody who came from this harsh, punishing belief in God. I began to gather my own evidence without anyone having to tell me that God was good, he loved and cared for me, that he sent his only son to die for my sins. John 10:14 says, I am the good shepherd, I know my sheep and my sheep know me. And I began to know God. My whole recovery turned around, and I took step two very seriously. So fast forward a few years, I met my husband David in my early 40s, and we began trying for a family straight away. So this was December. Well, I met him in September 2017, and December 2017 we started trying. So it's like 8 years, and it just didn't happen. It didn't happen for us. We done seven. We tried naturally, it didn't happen. Then we tried IVF and all of that, and we got pregnant once, and we lost our baby, and it just didn't happen again. And all of our dreams of a family were lost, and it's been one protracted grief. It's not like somebody's died and we've buried it and we can move on. It's just, every month, you have you're intimate, and then you're hoping, and then the time the month comes and there's a down, and then there's a up, and then there's a down. It's just been ongoing. Um, so yeah, like I prayed for my husband, like my family on here know like how long I was, and I prayed for him, and then God brought him into my life, and children were on my list, and children were on his list. It's like, right, God, you heard our prayers, right? It's been very, very, very challenging, infertility and being child free, not by choice. It's been the hardest thing that I've had to deal with in recovery so far. It's like I said, it's been one long, drawn out, protracted grief process, and now I'm 49, perimenopausal, and it feels like the fat lady singing on my hopes for a miracle. It's just, acceptance. I'm moving into acceptance, but that's a journey. But it's like it challenged everything I knew about for myself about God. Some people I've done, like Christian groups with women, and some of them have gone on to get pregnant. So it's like, am I not saying the right combination of prayers? That's what the head's been saying, you know. But no, God's plan has a plan and a purpose for my life. His plans for me are good. Yeah, it's just been difficult. It's just challenged my faith, my trust in him. At times I've not wanted to talk to him. That beautiful washing machine experience, was it even real? Yes, it was. The same God that helped the Israelites escape from Egypt, then fed them in the desert, made them wait 40 years to enter the promised land. It's the same God that tango slapped me when my washing machine broke down. It's the same God when Jesus prayed in the Garden of Gethsemane, God, if this is I know this is my cup, but if it's your will, please, let it be taken from me, but your will, not my will, be done. It's the same God. It's the same God that didn't remove my cup. If he's not going to remove it from his son, who am I? It's the same God that didn't answer my prayers the way that I wanted to. But, you know, and why? The question why? I've said that so many times to God, and not felt like I've got an answer. But Proverbs 3:5, 6, one of my favourite Bible passages, says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding, in all your ways to submit to him, and he will make your path straight. So, It's just like my diseases outside doing press ups and always waiting for me to slip up. So it's the enemy always waiting to talk rubbish in my ear about God, to say, see, I told you you couldn't trust him. I told you he didn't really love you. It's just waiting. But just like I have to work at applying the steps to life on life's terms, or just like I have to work at my marriage, I have to work at, my relationship with God, because my head is crazy and tells me lies. I know the truth. God loves me. He knitted me together in my mother's womb. He knew he loves me better than myself, but my head wants to tell me differently. So, I just keep putting one foot in front of the other and doing what I know. I worship and I praise God. I read my Bible. I go to church. I keep up with my step work. I keep in touch with my sponsor. I keep doing just doing the next right thing. And, I know, even though sometimes I feel, sometimes I pray and I can't hear God, or sometimes it feels like he's different, but the Bible tells us he's closer to us than our very breath, so he's there, he's working in the waiting. Or like I am a proper little addict. I'm like, oh, come on, God, but he don't work on my time. Thank God he works on his, and not my time. Yeah, so I just lean on those verses I read out there. They're the ones that I kind of, lean on. And there's others, but they're the ones I lean on, because like I said, the enemy lives there. And yeah, I keep coming back in recovery. I keep doing what I got to do for my faith walk with Jesus. And yeah, I'm not sure what else to say, so I think I'll leave it there.